Hello, my friends, and welcome to Origins. My name's Don Chapman. It's my privilege to be your host. You know, Origins is a forum where we take the evidence of science and we use it to validate the truth of creation. Today, our guest is Derek Isaacs. Derek is a fascinating young man. He's written 3 books, and he's been on the speaking tour at creation events, and we're really thrilled to have him with us today. Derek, there's a lot of things about your bio I could mention, but probably foremost is that you're a new father. Congratulations.
Well, thank you. Yes, my wife and I had our first child, and it is a game changer.
And her name is?
Evie.
Well, we'll be excited to watch Evie grow and see what God has for her as well.
Well, thank you.
I'm fascinated by the title of your book, Dragons or Dinosaurs. Tell us what that is about.
Well, the reason I wrote the book, Dragons or Dinosaurs, is because evolutionists use dinosaurs more than anything else to deceive children about the theory of evolution. You know, you hear it, it's inundated everywhere we go. It's in movie theaters, it's on radio, it's in airports, wherever it is, they push this idea, this fallacy that dinosaurs were separated from man by like 64 to 65 million years. And of course, that attacks the basic truth of a 6-day creation. And so I wanted to write a book to give an answer for the body of Messiah, so that when people hear dinosaurs died out millions and millions of years ago, we now have a strong biblical defense why that is not the case, and the truth of God can be trusted from the very beginning.
You know, you're absolutely right. As a pastor, I'll have parents pull me aside and say, you know, my kids come home, what about the dinosaurs? Like, there's no answer. And so I think our show is going to be very important for everyone, especially for parents and for some kids. All dinosaurs are not purple, is that true?
That's right.
Okay. So tell us about what does dragons have to do with this?
Well, there are stories in virtually every culture around the world, from China to South America to Europe to Australia, everywhere, of these big scaly reptiles that may just gnaw your face off. And that's what these stories were. And when you compare the dragon of history to what we know the dinosaurs were, you know, there's a lot of similarities there. And so what I did is I went through and went through history, went through all kinds of things, and showed that the stories of dragons very much match up to what we know about dinosaurs. And that's what my book and DVD is about.
All right. Well, you've done some research in the field. Will you tell us about that?
Absolutely.
All right.
Well, I'm going to head up here because this is where it all started for me. I did a dinosaur excavation in Glendive, Montana. It was one of the highlights of my life. And this is
you in the picture?
This is me in the picture.
I got to tell you, you've cleaned up real well.
Well, thank you, thank you. Well, I'll tell you why. The reason I'm so dirty here is that for 10 days, we lived out in the middle of nowhere with no showers or running water. Now, can you imagine some guys living in tents for 10 days without running water?
I can.
Okay, we discovered all kinds of new smells.
I'll bet you.
All right, but this is the terrain we had to go through to get to this place.
This is where?
Glendive, Montana.
Okay.
It was 25 minutes off of a road, and we went through these canyons and crevices and all that to get to this point. Now, where the dinosaur was that we were excavating is on top of this kind of cliff right here, and it just didn't die in a convenient place for either one of us, I guess. But we had to climb that and traverse that every single day. And then this is what we were doing is we were excavating it. We put a tent over the excavation site because we wanted to protect what we were uncovering, because like if we got a flash rain or anything like that, water is devastating and it remaps everything. Now, the type of dinosaur that we were digging up is like a Triceratops. It wasn't a Triceratops because it had very unique frill features, but this is it. And his name was Big John. His name we called him Big John because he was big, he was huge, he was like 34 feet. From nose to tail.
Okay.
So it was one of the biggest ones found. And John, well, that was the name of the guy who found him. So if you dig up a dinosaur, that's how it works. You can name him anything you want to name him. You can call him Dinosaur Don if you want.
All right.
You name him. Now, the kind of pieces that we were picking up were found in this. And if you notice, right here is the actual fossil, and it was embedded in rock. And so it was in that piece, to give you a concept, was about yay big. And so he was all these pieces, and we were just putting them together like a jigsaw puzzle, and we were carving them out like that. And then these things go to a lab, and they chisel out the rock real carefully. And when you get to the museum, it ends up in something like this. Now, the fossils that are in the field don't usually make it to a museum because this is a plaster cast. But the question is, We see pictures of dinosaurs with their flesh, with their skin, with colors. How do we really know what these things look like? Well, we do know what their skin was like because we've had fossilized skin found. And so we know they were very reptilian. We know that they were crocodilian in their exterior. This is hard evidence that we have. And here's another picture of a theropod. And again, we have the fossilized skin that we have found. So we know that these were really reptilian type creatures. That's scientific fact. Now, the question is then, when did these dinosaurs live?
Everybody knows there was dinosaurs, creationists, evolutionists.
That's right.
The issue is not, are there dinosaurs, but when did they live?
That's right. And the evolutionists are going to demand that there's a 65 million year gap between man and dinosaurs. There is no room in our biblical timeline for a big 65 million year gap. So the question is, we look at the Bible, we know it's the history book of the universe. That is the claim of the Bible. And we have to come up to the question is, who is your authority? Is it the Word of God or is it the Word of man? And I think from a spiritual level, this is where all of us have to land. We have to ask ourselves these questions. Who are we going to believe? Some unknown scientist telling us things, or are we going to believe the Word of God? Now, what is fascinating, and one of the reasons why I got out and wrote this book is because of this quote. It's from Louis Jacobs, a famous evolutionist, and he said this: "Co-occurrence of men and dinosaurs. Such an association would dispel an earth with vast antiquity. The entire history of creation, including the day of rest, could be accommodated in the 7 biblical days of the Genesis myth. Evolution would be vanquished."
Wow.
Isn't that an extraordinary quote?
It is. Yeah, it's an amazing quote. They acknowledge that if this were true, then Genesis is true. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so what he did is he drew basically a line in the sand. And he challenged everybody, listen, if you can prove there's a co-occurrence of men and dinosaurs, then evolution would be vanquished. Now, why would he make that kind of assertion? And what I believe is that he understands that the entire evolutionary worldview is based on these millions and millions and millions of years. And if we're able to show something that they think went extinct 65 million years ago to be contemporaries with man, that smashes their timeline like an accordion.
That's right.
And it's just over at that point. The house of cards has fallen. So this is why we did this project.
All right.
And so what I did is I went through what I call dinosaur historicity. And I studied theology, oral history, mythology, paleontology, archaeology, and written history. And in my book, I went through each one of these to see if there's evidence of man and dinosaur coexistence, but I also wanted to see if they overlapped each other. You know, does the theology agree with the oral history? Does the oral history agree with the mythology? And so on and so forth.
Continuity through all of, yeah.
That's right. Is there a common thread that can be established? So we're going to start today with mythology, which is the most fanciful of them all, of course, because, you know, a lot of times in mythology, you know, some fascinating and kind of supernatural powers were given to dragons. But this is going to lay an interesting foundation for us, because Carol Rose, an expert in mythology, wrote this about the dragon. She said the most general description of the Occidental dragon, which is European, is very similar to that of the Oriental dragon, being an enormous, elongated, scale-covered body like that of a crocodile, often with vast wings like those of a bat, and having huge legs like those of a lizard with long claws. It may have a toothed dorsal ridge extending to a long serpentine tail, usually barbed. Its head may be like that of a vast lizard or crocodile, but with either a crest or horns on the head. Now, if you know your dinosaurs, this is a perfect composite
she just
image.
described a dinosaur.
She did.
Yes.
You know, and with a pterosaur thrown into the mix. That is basically what she did, is that, you know, and here's an expert in mythology saying this is really what the dragon is.
When you say Occidental, you're talking about Europe. When you say Oriental, obviously you're talking about the Far East. And you're saying that in both places, and it's pretty universal then, that the description is the same all over the earth.
That's right.
Yes.
And so we have a logical conundrum if we're actually going to say that all of these stories about dragons are completely fictitious and a product of a mere imagination, when everyone around the world and all these ancient civilizations created the same creature in which to fear.
Derek, isn't it true that almost every legend has to begin with a kernel of truth and then it grows myth around it?
Well, there is a lot of truth to that. And so when you're dealing with not just Europe and the Orient, but then you're dealing with Africa, and you're dealing with North America, and you're dealing with South America, and they're all creating, they all have stories of the same creature.
Yeah.
At some point, we have to step back and go, okay, there is something true to this.
Yes.
And this was our foundation, saying we have legends everywhere. And you know what's fascinating? And it's not just creationists that have tied the very large, have connected the very large dots. You know, evolutionists, secularists as well. We'll get to that here in a second.
All right.
But what I wanted to show you is dinosaurs that actually match the description of the dragons. You know, here we have a dinosaur with dermal spines, claws, legs like a lizard, head like a crocodile. Nearly all of these characteristics are the characteristics of a dragon. We have the bat-like wings. Now, pterosaur is not technically a dinosaur because dinosaurs are land creatures. But here's your bat-like wings, and if you can see, and the picture's not as clear as we would like, but if you look at the bat, the joints, the membrane-like wings, the posture, and then you look at the pterosaur, the joints, the claws at the top, the membrane-like wings, the posture, it is a dead ringer. So if someone's going to say, hey, a dragon has bat-like wings, and we look at a pterosaur and we look like a bat, that is a perfect description of the two. We also have barbed tails on this Stegosaurus. Barbed tails was also another characteristic of dragons. Now, this is my favorite. This is called Dracorex, and this is an actual dinosaur. And the paleontologist that discovered this dinosaur was so surprised at the dragon features that they actually named him after a dragon. Draco would be in the Greek word for dragon. And what's fascinating is the full name of this creature was named after a dragon in the Harry Potter movies. This is not an endorsement of those movies, but that's what they did. And the name of this creature is Dracorex hogwartsia. And I just thought the irony knows no bounds.
Yes.
And what's fascinating is those dragons were a common feature of legends and folklore from ancient times in virtually every culture of the world. Carol Rose says that. So once again, we have absolutely everywhere the stories of these big-scaled reptiles. And Carl Sagan, the famous atheist, actually said the same thing. The pervasiveness of dragon myths in the folk legends of many cultures is probably no accident. It's a worldwide phenomenon. And this is a point that's important, is that the secularists that are actually studied know it's a worldwide phenomenon. But with Sagan, he believes in evolution. He believes dinosaurs are a product that died out, you know, a creature that died out 65 million years ago. So how does he explain why dragons sound like dinosaurs?
So what does he say?
Well, he believes that, well, I'll just read this and explain. He goes, the art complex is functioning in the dreams of humans. The dragons can be heard hissing and rasping, and the dinosaurs thunder still. Let me explain what he's saying here. He believed that modern man inherited memories in our DNA from 100 million years ago. And so what is happening, according to Sagan, is when we dream and we dream up of dragons, we're actually remembering dinosaurs like reincarnated memories, which is crazy.
Yes, it is.
And
I don't think you inherit memories through DNA.
absolutely, it's ludicrous.
It is.
But what's interesting is he uses dragons and dinosaurs interchangeably. And that's for the people that would scoff at this apologetic, they have to understand this is also shared, this view is shared from the secularists as well. And he goes on to say, we may, each of us, be replaying the 100-million-year-old warfare between reptiles and mammals. And that's his answer.
Okay.
Now, we also, if we go to oral history, so we know about the legends, but now we have the oral history. What's fascinating is a Navajo historian named Vine Deloria just came out and said there are dinosaur stories. Now we go to archaeology. So we have legends, we have oral history, and now archaeology. Now this is an incredible tomb. It's in Carlisle Cathedral. Bishop Bell's tomb in the 15th century is where this comes from. And what I'm going to do is...
Is that in London?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay.
And I'm going to zoom in on two of the creatures that are in the carving around the edge of this. And what I'm going to show, there are two creatures here. And I'm going to zoom in on the one on the right, and then I'm going to place.
Are they fighting? Is that?
Well, they're intertwined. Their necks are intertwined.
Okay. There they are.
Here they are. Now, what I did is I put a sauropod underneath it. Now, what I want everyone to see is the ratios of everything. Look at the tail of both of them. Look at the tail. Look at the girth in the belly here. All right? Very similar. All right? The posture of the legs, the four legs, and the long neck, Now, you can't really see this in here because it's hundreds of years old, but the neck of this actually extends like this, if I can draw that in. And so by the time you see all of this, it's like they have drawn a perfect representation.
It sure looks like the guy
that
made that drawing had seen something like that.
Absolutely. And he didn't draw a fossil. He drew the actual bodily girth.
Right.
Which is very, very important. Now, here I am, and I'm in Utah at this point, over at Kachina Bridge, and where I'm trying to get to is underneath this bridge right here. And I climbed up because there was a petroglyph, a rock carving, there was a rock carving that I wanted to get to. And I'm going to zoom in real quick. And this is what that rock carving looked like. A rock expert said there's a petroglyph in Natural Bridges National Monument that bears a startling resemblance to a dinosaur. And this is dated to around 1200 AD. And so what we have rock carvings, we have carvings in brass, we have oral history, we have legends that are all saying the same thing, is that man not too long ago were encountering creatures like that, and they're known creatures, and the creatures are dinosaurs.
Well, Derek, it seems obvious to me when I think about rock carvings and paintings on the walls of caves that the people that lived in those caves were drawing things that they had seen in everyday life.
That's right.
And so when we have a drawing or a carving of a dinosaur, it's not illogical to assume that the man that made that carving had seen a dinosaur about 1,200 years before Jesus. Is that really what we're implying here?
That is exactly right.
All right. We've got to take a break, and then we'll come talk about what written history adds to this evidence that we've assembled. Don't you go away. We'll be right back.
Today's guest on Origins, Derek Isaacs, is an author, speaker, and television producer. Derek is president and founder of Watchman 33, an organization that's focused on defending and confirming the authority of the Bible. He's also written several books, including The Extinction of Evolution and Dragons or Dinosaurs. Book orders are being taken at 1-800-631-5802. For more information, write to Bridge Logos Foundation, 17750 Northwest 115th Avenue, Building 200, Suite 220, Alachua, Florida 32615. Or visit the website at www.bridgelogos.com.
We are back with Derek Isaacs. We're talking about dragons or dinosaurs. Now, you were talking about the importance of if we can show that human beings and dinosaurs live together, we collapse this billions and millions of year time frame that the evolutionists want us to believe. And it's all back to a young Earth game. That's kind of what we're working on, right?
That's exactly right. It's a very powerful apologetic to demonstrate that man and dinosaur coexisted.
So what have you learned from written history?
Well, written history is fascinating. That is what we're up to next. And what we know is we have three just heavyweights of history. You have Herodotus, the Greek historian of 400 BC. You have Flavius Josephus, the Jewish historian of 1st century AD. And then you have Pliny the Elder, the Roman historian of 1st century AD. And if you know your history, these are the heavyweights.
Yes, they are.
And all three of them deal with dragons, giant reptiles, flying reptiles, things that match the dinosaurian kind. And I'm going to take you directly to Pliny the Elder because what he says is absolutely extraordinary.
Okay.
He wrote, Ethiopia produces dragons, but not so large as those of India, but still 20 cubits in length. Now, what's fascinating to me, I mean, Pliny was not a purveyor of myth. He was a true historian,
Right.
and he's speaking matter-of-factly about the dragons in Ethiopia.
And he's a Roman, and the Roman Empire had gone to Ethiopia and had gone to India, so they have firsthand eyewitnesses in both those places. And he's comparing dragons from two different parts of the empire.
Absolutely,
Yes.
it's incredible. And if we are to believe that dragons are mythological, why is he using a cubit to measure their length?
Yeah, you don't measure legends.
No, it is absolutely incredible that this account. And
That's
then
a fascinating account.
And then he goes on and he says this: the contest is equally fatal to both. The elephant vanquished falls to the earth and by its weight crushes the dragon which is entwined around it. He's actually talking about what dragons are feeding upon.
Dragons and elephants fighting. Yeah.
That's right. And in my book, I found occurrences in North America, in Europe, in Asia, and Africa with these dragons and giant reptiles feeding on elephants.
Yeah.
So that's extraordinarily powerful
It
because
really is.
now we demonstrate a common food source for these creatures, whether it's a rock carving in France or the American Indian stories in North America.
There's a consistency that runs through all of them.
That's right. And that was one of the joys, I guess I could say, in my research, was finding a consistency of a food source.
Yeah.
And I thought that was just absolutely incredible. Now, what I'd like to do is go to paleontology because, you know, there are some people that just want something out of a laboratory. They just want something that's just from the field of science. Now, what we have shown so far is oral history, mythology, archaeology, written history, and there is one message to all of it, is that man did encounter some giant reptile that we would call dinosaurs today. Now, what would paleontology say to all of this? Well, this is fascinating because back a few years ago in Montana, they dug up a T-Rex. And this T-Rex was not too far away from where we were digging up Big John. So I kind of know the terrain a little bit. But what was fascinating is this bone, this fossil that they excavated was too large for them to get it out by itself. And so the paleontologists ended up carving and cutting the fossil in half, which is something that you never do,
Right.
but they had to just to get it out of the site. And they put it on a helicopter and they flew it back to their laboratory and they put the thing under a microscope. This is what they saw. They saw soft elastic tissue that when it was stretched, it snapped back to its original form. They found blood cells. They found fibrous tissues. They found everything that should have decayed, not in millions of years, not even in thousands and thousands and thousands of years, but things that should have been decayed in the last few thousand years.
Derek, as you've studied this, how old do you think this is?
Well, it cannot be any older than 4,000 to 5,000 years old.
Yeah.
It simply cannot.
Yeah.
Flesh decomposes. Everything we know about flesh is that it is rapid in how it decays and breaks down and is refed into our environment. Once this happened, the faucet, if you will, got turned on because other scientists around the world said, wait a minute, if that is happening in that bone, let's take a closer look at our others. Once they found out that there was something there, more blood cells were being found. And again, there was a supposedly 80-million-year-old mosasaur fossil that had soft retina and blood residue that was discovered.
Derek, if our viewers are going to remember one thing from this program today, what do you want them to take away?
That the only worldview in history that confirms man and dinosaur coexistence is the biblical worldview.
That's right. And so we believe in dinosaurs. It's just that they coexisted with man, and not that long ago, we've got the tissue to prove it in addition to all the legends and myth and all the rest of it. And I believe that the truth is, again, coming out on the side of the Bible, which is, of course, our source of truth. When we look deeper into the facts, it's amazing how the stuff that we discover always validates God's Word. And that's why I urge you, as you look at the dinosaurs, of course there were dinosaurs. Teach your kids about dinosaurs, but teach them that God made them during 6 days when He made everything else. You know, it's God's view that He created you, and that should always be your worldview too. Thanks for joining us today. I hope you've learned from Derek sharing with us. I hope you'll join us again soon on Origins. And until then, God be with you, my friend.
Thank you for watching this edition of Origins. If you'd like a copy of the PowerPoint information presented today, you can download a PDF file from our website at www.originstv.org. Or for a DVD of this series, send a $12 donation to cover shipping and handling and write to Origins Program, number 1405, Cornerstone Television, Wall, Pennsylvania 15148.
Origins is made possible by the faithful prayers and financial support of you, our Cornerstone family.